to Money Talks. I'm Genevieve Westcott with your latest financial news from across New Zealand and around the world. In this edition, is the crisis in Europe finally being dealt to by all those European governments? The equity markets seem to be making up lost ground. Riding to the rescue, French President Sarkozy and German Chancellor Merkel with what they say is a new comprehensive crisis package waiting in the wings. And the latest business confidence figures here at home have dropped, and some economists are blaming it all on the Rugby World Cup. But let's kick off with some good news. Equity markets have come back strong over the past few days after the lows of the beginning of the month. Joining me now to tell us more is ASB Rural economist James Shortall. James, good to have you on the show.
Good to be here.
So the equity markets are clawing their way back slowly. It's about time.
Yeah, they have been clawing back. And when we looked at earlier in the month, then there was every chance that US markets could have dropped by 20% since their highs, which would have been a bear market, which is pretty ugly times. But the last sort of week, we've managed to claw back a little bit and make a few gains.
And all because some of the European leaders now say that they will deal to the massive debt crisis in Europe. What's the latest?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. We've been talking about Europe for quite some time now, and how often are we talking about what's happening in Slovakian meetings in Greek boardrooms, that sort of thing. But that's been the focus of the last couple of months. So what has been happening, it seems like they may actually be starting to get a bit more traction with what they're going to do there, and that's given markets a bit more confidence around the fact that it may not be quite as bad as what they were thinking.
Meantime, Italy and Spain have both been downgraded. My question, what took them?
Yeah, well, I mean, we've been downgraded too, so there's been plenty of downgrades happening, and not really surprising. But it does seem like a lot of focus been on the Germans and the French, and the fact that they have actually decided that they're really going to get things moving. There's a few sticking points, but it really does seem like they are trying to make some decisions and get around it.
Moving to the U.S., U.S. job data, surprisingly better than a lot of us thought.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the unemployment rate still at 9.1%, but people were employing new job candidates, and that's good news, I guess, for the US economy. There's still a lot of things going on over in America that it's still a pretty ugly situation. But if it's not getting worse, if it's getting slightly better, then that's good news.
Here at home, BNZ economists now claim that business confidence here has dropped in the 3 months to September. Does that surprise you?
Well, not really. I mean, when you consider all the talk that's happening around the world, even though New Zealand is looking pretty good, we're looking relatively stable. There does seem like there's a bit of activity going on. We've got the Rugby World Cup going on, all those sorts of things. When you consider all this negative news, all this bad news coming in from overseas, and the fact that we could see global slowdown, all these aspects, then it's not surprising that business owners are just thinking, hey, I think I'm just a bit worried about the outlook. Okay,
let's talk global dairy prices now. Still coming down, softening. What's going to happen in the next year?
Well, prices have, softening, and over the past 8 weeks, eight sort of auctions, it's been quite a drift down.
I know you hate to see it and you hate to talk about it.
I hate to talk about it.
We're grown-ups here.
Yeah. But I think prices are still holding up really, really well considering what's been going on around the world, and they're still at good levels compared to what they were last year. So I think our main export markets are still going pretty well, unless we see a slowdown out of China driven by what's happening out of Europe. Then I'm not picking that we're going to see a big drop down in dairy commodity prices. Hopefully, if we do get through this soft patch, we may actually see a lift.
And US beef prices still holding their own?
Yeah, it's surprising. I mean, I've sort of been picking that beef prices will ease off, which they have in some ways, but they probably haven't eased as much as what I've thought. Just because we've been predicting that supply is going to be coming on board, and it has in some ways, but not quite as much as most people have been predicting. So US price is still looking pretty good, and with a slightly lower New Zealand dollar, New Zealand schedules have actually lifted off some of the lows we've seen recently.
And of course, especially in the US, grain prices have really tumbled, but good news, they've got rain. What's that mean for us here?
Well, it means lower prices in general, which isn't great news, I guess, around the world, because the US situation, we've had very, very high grain prices out of the US. They've come back with the turmoil around the world, but also crop conditions have improved. So they may actually get more out of the ground than what they've been picking. So the implications, I guess, on the global market is that there's going to be more grain out there. That means more grain at lower prices for feedlots, for dairy cows, that sort of thing, which may just facilitate a little bit more supply.
Thanks, James. Coming up after the break, What does international motor racing legend Bruce McLaren and iconic fuel company Gulf Oil have to do with 25,000 New Zealand farmers? Find out from the billion-dollar baby, up close and personal with CRT CEO Brent Esler, who shares his secrets for success as he steers New Zealand's largest rural supplies company smoothly through murky financial waters. Don't go away. Ponder this in our Farmers Facts and Figures quiz. Where in the world will you find the globe's best performing share market? The answer when we return. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Money Talks. Just before the break, we asked you, where in the world will you find the globe's best performing share market? The answer, in New Zealand. That's right, the NZX is leading the world. It's been a terrible year for world share markets. The 24 developed markets were down 11.8% over the first 9 months, while the emerging markets were down 21.7%. But the NZX was up 11.1%, making us the only country in the world to have a positive return in local currency terms. Well done. And more congratulations are due to the man you're about to meet, whose Farmers Co-op broke the billion-dollar mark in total turnover this year. Joining us now is the CEO of CRT, Brent Esler, who heads up the latest Kiwi company to make it into the billion-dollar business club. Brent, welcome to the show. Your turnover this year went up 36% to $1.1 billion. How did you do it?
Well, we've had a pretty good growth path over the last few years, and $1 billion was sort of a target for that year. And some major developments in our fuel business was probably the biggest lift we had. We took over the Challenge fuel brand from Chevron during the year and supply to the 85 Challenge service stations. So that was a significant lift in the turnover. But all parts of the business actually grew really well, and it's kind of a platform that's been building over the last 7 or 8 years following sort of a consolidation of South Island farmer cooperatives into CRT.
Now, your company assets grew to $204 million, up 32.8%. You know, the rest of the world, James, has been struggling with the global financial crisis. What's your response when you see a company like this doing so well?
Well, it's good news, right? They must be doing things, doing some of the good things, and it's probably a reflection of the agricultural industry's been doing quite well too. So and as well as organic growth. So I think it's good news all around. Give
us just a snapshot quickly of where the main areas of your business are. I understand there are 3 of them. You talked about the oil business a little bit. Where are you at?
Yeah, there is 3 main streams of CRT's business, and they've actually been pretty much the backbone of the company, and they've just sort of evolved, I guess, over time. But a core business in farm supplies with rural supply stores. We've vertically integrated into feed manufacturing, real estate, finance, livestock, and a seed business. And so that sort of encompasses basically the core of our rural supplies business. We've had CRT card business, a very successful charge card operation, and probably goes back to the earliest origins of CRT as a buying group in the 1960s, and it's a really significant part of our operation. And the fuel business, which is, again, CRT's had a long involvement in, but that involvement has moved from being a third-party distributor of fuel to being directly involved in fuel distribution, and emerged as one of the largest independent fuel distributors in New Zealand now.
So you've set up a wholly owned subsidiary now. Mm-hmm. You are the managing director of that. Tell me about Gulf Oil. Why did you want to get into this business? You're distributing now in New Zealand, mm-hmm. in Australia, and in the South Pacific. This is a whole new way to go.
Yes, it was quite an exciting development, really. And with the fuel business, the size of the fuel business, we were really looking for a very competitive oil offer. And we'd gone to the market and basically found that Gulf Oil was unrepresented in New Zealand, a very strong brand, one of the original 7 oil companies in the world, so a great sort of legacy there. Had some very good strong connections with some of New Zealand's motorsport sort of heroes. And
Bruce McLaren, I'm thinking of?
Denny Hulme and Chris Amon all had associations with Gulf Oil over their time, and so it was a good brand to pick up, and we were in need of a competitive oil offer in our retail stores, but more particularly in our fuel business, which, as I say, has sort of grown to be one of the larger independent fuel distributors in New Zealand.
You're based, of course, in the South Island.
Mm-hmm.
What's your market share at the moment?
we've always sort of picked that we're around, maybe 30% of the rural supplies, maybe 30 to 40% of the rural supplies market in the South Island by now. But that varies quite a bit by sector and by region. Different players, some areas there's some local players with very, very strong market share. But overall, we're probably tracking sort of in the 30 to 40% market share in the South Island. And our fuel business is a bit peculiar because in the space of 2 or 3 years, we've actually got a bigger fuel business in the North Island than what we have in the South after 40 years. So
that's really something. Do you have plans to expand into the North Island at any point?
Well, the fuel business is already well established there, and we supply a lot of our manufactured feed into the North Island. In rural supplies, we work closely with Farmlands, who are sort of a similarly structured organisation in the North Island. So, and the farm supplies market is very, very tough, and if anything, probably somewhat over-serviced. So we've got no intention to sort of come and open in rural supply stores in the North Island. It would be a pretty hard road.
Of course, you've done phenomenally well despite the Christchurch earthquake. And here on this show, James, we've talked about the economic outfall from that. All of our earthquake levies now are going to go up, triple? The government's banks are, of course, bust. We've got to build it up. How is the rebuild coming in terms of economic activity down in the South Island?
Well, I mean, the rebuild is not happening, right, unfortunately. And I think a lot of people have been predicting that we're going to see this good economic growth out of the rebuild, and it was going to happen a lot faster than what it has, and really doesn't seem like there's going to be happening anything. There won't be much happening in the next 6 months. It could just be pushed out even further. So, that's had a bit of a negative bearing on the New Zealand economy, and we haven't really been able to pick up on that just yet. But I guess a lot of farmers have still been able to, they have been less affected, they've still been able to spend, and they've still been having, a lot of farmers have had a fantastic year, and, being out on the farms recently, they all seem very, very positive about their outlook and very, very positive about how their farms are going. They've had good springs, and they're going pretty well.
Yeah. How were you affected during the Christchurch quake? Your new feed mill took a hit, didn't it?
The September quake was quite bad out in that Rolleston sort of Darfield area, and we suffered pretty significant damage there to some silos particularly were badly damaged, and probably if it took to February, I think, to sort of restore production. The subsequent quakes really hit the city worse, and largely unaffected farmers or ourselves really. So probably as a company we fared fairly well. I think some of our employees felt the worst of the subsequent events, but as a company we weren't too badly affected.
I'd be interested in your views of how you feel the agricultural economy, particularly in the South Island, is doing right now, and where do you see it heading a year from now?
I think, the signs at the moment, I think it's very, very, very positive at the moment, and I think, as always, I think the long-term outlook for agriculture is very positive, and it's just subject to a lot of volatility in short cycles with international events kind of beyond our control. But I think the overall mood, I think, of farmers is very positive, and I think the next 12 months are very positive. We're really looking to have another record year, I hope. We're sort of targeting to hit sort of $1.3 billion this year as our goal, and and we're well on the way to doing it. We're about, I think, somewhere over 20% up on sales last year at this point. So,
here's a question. What do you really love about what you do, Brent?
Opportunity. There's just constant opportunity. I've been very fortunate, I think, in my time in CRT, we've had a lot of opportunity for merger, acquisition, development, and like farming itself, there is a lot of consolidation happening in farming, and there's also a lot of consolidation happening in the farm supplies area, and it's been pretty exciting to be part of that. And we've grown well, and the $1 billion turnover is a great milestone, but you've got to keep your feet on the ground, and basically our customers simply want good service, and maintaining all the things that made us good in terms of close customer relationship and having the right products at the right time at the right prices are still absolutely vital to us.
Yeah, there are, of course, a lot of farm supply businesses in New Zealand. Are we going to see the day sometime, James, do you think, where there's going to be one or two big players in a very small and crowded marketplace?
Possibly, yeah. And we've already seen, Brent's already pointed out, we've seen huge amount of consolidation over the last 10 years, and not only through CRT, but we're seeing PGG Wrightson's, Williams and Kettle, all of those, a lot of amalgamations, and there's every chance that there could be further because it is a crowded market, it's a very competitive market. Margins, I'm assuming, are quite tight in some areas, and until you start to get that wider scale, then it makes it much more difficult.
Yeah, and of course, the latest Reserve Bank figures tell us that farm debt levels are rising very quickly. How much money are farmers going to have in coming years to keep companies like yours successful?
Yeah, I think the outlook is very good. I think there is this consolidation happening. I think the farming systems are improving all the time. I think the productivity of farms is improving, and I think the debt levels probably reflect the rising values of the farms and the subsequent production anyway. And I don't think there's anything too alarming in those debt levels.
Okay, it's not just about making acquisitions, though. Any great company, you have to get rid of the dead wood. What isn't going so well in your business?
I think most aspects of our business are actually going very well. I think there's, the interesting thing, I guess, is the business is evolving. There's parts of it that are quite new. Finance and livestock have been areas that have been added in the last 2 years.
And Silver Fern Farms, of course, a couple of years back, wasn't too pleased with you guys getting into livestock.
No, they weren't too pleased, but that's sort of life. And I think, I understand, the meat companies' desire to sort of shorten the supply chain and everything, but the reality is there's always going to be a space for independent livestock activity, and while there's an opportunity there and a need from farmers, we'll be there to serve it.
Global growth forecasts, of course, James, are predicting, no matter who you talk to slow in the coming probably couple of years at least. How is that going to affect New Zealand, do you think?
Well, I guess the key thing is that yes, that global growth forecasts have been pulled back, but they're still above trend. So we're still above the long-term average, which is good news. And the good news for us here at home is that the countries where we're exporting and the countries where we've benefited from over the last couple of years, they're still going pretty well, and we're still expecting them to go well over the next few years. So while we've got these issues in the US, we've got these issues in the European nations, and the Chinese are still going well, other developing economies are still going well, and they still want our food. So we can still keep on pumping it out there, keep on sending it out there, and hopefully we'll still do pretty well out of it.
And it's interesting. I look at Brent here. You've been with CRT 14 years, I believe. You've been the CEO for 7 years. Most CEOs that we deal with are around 2 to 3 years. Here's a guy bucking the trends. Why do they think they want to keep you there? What do you give the company? What is your philosophy that is driving this kind of success?
Well, I think we've really focused on the real basics of doing things right. I mean, we've looked for new opportunities, but at the same time we've remained very focused on exploiting our cooperative advantage, I think, which is that sort of key relationship of shareholders, customers, and I think that whole connection to the market has been very, very important. We've worked really hard, and I've worked really hard on maintaining very strong relationships with our key suppliers, and the growth we've enjoyed with Chevron on the fuel business is sort of testimony to that. So I think there's a lot of opportunity. I've got a lot of passion still to grow the business, and while I've got that enthusiasm and fire there, I think there's a good future.
It is interesting because when I went and looked at your website, incredible amount of social media that you guys are using to stay connected to your people, a lot of activities that you put on for your shareholders, now at 25,000. How many more shareholders would you like to get? How many could you accommodate realistically?
Well, I think in terms of true farmer numbers in the South Island, we're probably close to saturation point, and I think the most likely sort of growth in the longer term is sort of amalgamations nationally, and I think that's where the real strength will come. I mean, you talked about the rationalisation of the players in that farm suppliers market, and I think in time, it is likely to see the emergence of a very, very strong corporate player and a very, very strong cooperative player, and in there somewhere there'll be a real balance of power, and where the cooperative continue to do its work to ensure there's competition in the marketplace to benefit farmers, which is what we were set up to do, and that's really the future for us.
Coming up after the break, future proof on the highways and byways of the economic world. Buckle up as our experts take us along for the ride and point out what they'll be watching over the coming week. As mentioned, Kiwi motor racing legend Bruce McLaren gave Gulf Oil huge prestige in the United States. So a question for you now in our Farmers Facts and Figures quiz. How many of the 37 Can-Am races in the U.S. from 1967 to 1970 did Bruce McLaren cars win? Find out after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back to Money Talks. Just before the break, we asked you how many of the 37 Can-Am races in the U.S. from 1967 to 1970 did Bruce McLaren cars win? McLaren cars won 32 of 37 Can-Am races, dominating the then richest championship in the world. That's pretty good. And now it's time for Future Proof. What's coming up for our experts? I'll begin with you, James. What are you going to be watching out for in the next 7 days?
Well, hopefully we get some resolution out of Europe, I guess, but most importantly, the Rugby World Cup.
The Rugby World Cup, rugby.
Enough about finance. Everyone's talking about the Rugby World Cup around here, so I think that's going to be my focus for the weekend.
So what are you picking? What do you think?
Oh, well, I've got to go for the All Blacks, right? But it's fair to say that the Aussies make me nervous. I would have preferred to be playing South Africa. I think the Aussies are dangerous when they get on their game, and let's just hope they're not on their game on Sunday. We
will find out what happens. Now, you have a link to Richie McCaw. Tell me about that, Brent.
Well, Richie's father works for us. He runs our seed store in Rolleston, so yeah, we've got strong faith in the All Blacks.
Yeah, you think it's going to go all right, do you?
Absolutely.
Now, you're going to the airport tomorrow to meet a big banana from the international world of Gulf Oil who's coming in for a special event for CRT. Tell me about that.
Yeah, we've got the president of Gulf Oil International, Mr. Alain Dujon, coming out from London, and yeah, obviously a bit of a French interest in what's happening this weekend in Auckland, but while he's here, him and his wife are going to come down to South Canterbury for the Waimate 50 Revival sort of sprint race down there, which is a motor race that ran from 1959 till 1967, I think, and the inaugural race was won by Bruce McLaren in 1959, so Mr. Dujon is going to be our guest down there, and look forward to showing him a bit of South Canterbury farming and at the same time. Fantastic.
Now, you're a bit of a motorhead yourself, I understand. Tell me about that.
I've got a bit of interest in motorsport, yes. I've done a bit of motorsport and still participate, and yeah, so I'm quite enthusiastic, and we're through the Gulf Oil connection, we're supporting the Bruce McLaren Trust, and really I think trying to ensure the legacy created by Bruce McLaren with the I guess the creator of the most successful team in Grand Prix history is not forgotten. I mean, I was intrigued as in Europe early this year on a Gulf Oil business, and in a room of petrol heads, there was virtually nobody in that room that would have actually made the connection of Bruce McLaren to the McLaren racing team or New Zealand. So it's sort of, it's important that legacy is never lost.
Unbelievable, and really he was just a humble kid that came from Remuera. His mom and dad had a service station, and he used to like to tinker around. What is it about Kiwis that make them so good at doing amazing things, do you think?
I think ambition, and and it's maybe a bit of that geographic factor of having to do things yourself. I think it's been one of the mainstays of New Zealand farming, that innovation that sort of comes from being isolated, I think. And it's sort of a really great image in early this year is in the Bruce McLaren Trust, pictures of Bruce McLaren on a traction bed in a crippled children's home at the age of 10 to 12, 2 years in a crippled children's home, and to sort of come from that to be the youngest ever winner of a Formula One Grand Prix, the creator of the greatest motorsport team in history, is fantastic achievement, and New Zealand should be really proud of having people like that.
And in terms of certainly the economy, do we still have the equivalent of the Bruce McLarens around, do you think? Do we have it in us, or have we gotten too big, too fat, too sitting back waiting for the government to do everything for us? What do you reckon?
No, I think we've still got it in us, and a theme that I've really pushed this year in our company, a bit to do with, the $1 billion, that's nothing to get sort of that shaken up about, but it's still good to have goals and targets, and a bit aligned with the life of Bruce McLaren, sort of dream, believe and achieve. And I think, people need to have those ambitions and follow those ambitions. And I think there's some real achievers in New Zealand. There's some great stories out there.
Okay, well, let's hope the All Blacks are listening.
That's right.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thanks to my guests, CRT's Man of the Moment, Brent Esler, and ASB rural economist James Shortall. Be sure to check out our website. We'll give the last word to Bruce McLaren, the Kiwi kid from Remuera who grew up to be an international motor racing legend. At 15, he took to the track. By the age of 22, he became the youngest driver to win Formula One. In 1966, he conquered the world's most prestigious endurance race, the Le Mans 24 Hours. Tragically, the racing track he loved so much claimed his life in Great Britain in June 1970 at the tender age of 32. Bruce McLaren himself once wrote, "It would be a waste of life to do nothing with one's ability. Life is measured in achievement, not in years alone." Keep the faith. See you next time.